what's up guys, I'm back. Today we're going to be looking at the first drop of my How to Fly remix. It's kind of like a hard wave drop, so let's get into it. Today we're just going to be looking at the hard wave drop, and then I'm going to do an episode 2 of this where I go over this more trap leaning drop 2. And for this breakdown, I kind of want to, instead of just showing off all the layers, I kind of want to take you through the process of creating this because I think it could be helpful if you're trying to remix something. So yeah, let's start with what I started with. So the first thing I did, scroll down here, was render out some sections of the song. So that's these 4 parts. So I just exported out my favorite kind of melodic parts from the song so I can make some pads out of them. So here's what I grabbed. When I'm making pads, I'm looking for a section that has kind of a lot of notes playing and a lot of melodies and stuff. So the way I make these pads, I have 2 methods, and I'm going to show you both. So the first one is using Quanta. I kind of just experiment with the different samples and messing with this. So I kind of just scroll through the sample while I mess with these parameters, and I'll resample that to audio, and I'll do that for my 4 selected snippets here. And the second way I do is for more of a atmospherical layer is I use my granulator pad rack that's up on my store. I do the same thing. I just drag and drop one of these exports. It'll make a nice little atmospheric pad out of whatever you throw in it. Let's try this one, for example. We go up an octave. So that's what I do. So I got about, I don't know, probably like 10 or so different pads just so I have something to work with here. Because I knew I wanted to do a melodic drop, and that's kind of how I fill out the stack. I don't really like to write chord stacks with supersaws. I like to use pads. So let's look at some of the layers that I ended up using. And then in the actual drop stack, I have, so that one's panned all the way right. This one's panned all the way left. That one's just part of the actual song. I made a little riser out of this one. This one's probably my favorite layer. This one was from Quanta, and you could just hear how back and forth it goes. Yeah, so let's listen to this stack together. So this gray group right here is just strictly pads from the original song. As you can see, there's no MIDI in here. This is just sample manipulation with pitch bends and stuff like that. I should mention there is one layer actually that isn't from the song. It's this one. I just needed kind of a very noisy, like high-end white noise sizzle layer. So this is just from one of the samples I had. So I just threw it in there. I just labeled the notes so it's easy for me to drag and drop them, based on the song progression. All right, so once I had all the pads in here, the next thing I did was lay down the drums. Play this group as a whole real quick. So for the drums, nice super short little kick, bit of transient shaper, and then the snare I had to move out to a different group because it was messing up the sidechain, but I have a few here layered. So this first one's from my sample pack, then I layered it with a clap, and then another snare for my sample pack that's like really big, kind of future bassy one to get that tail on it. The perks, really nothing fancy, just hat loop, a wide ride, synth crash, a little accent, kind of auto panny hat loop, kind of a response, like kind of call and response. I have an extra crash hitting on the kicks for the second part. Right, so we have our drums and our atmospheres now. So the next thing I did was just grab the bass line from the original song, and I just copied it into the sub and the mid bass group. So let's go through these mid basses first. Here's the group as a whole. Go a little layer by layer action here. That's just a square, very mono. It's like a pretty wide Reese. Another Reese with some more white noise and a little bit more mono. And then like pretty wide Reese with, I think it's up an octave too. So there's our mid basses. Just getting a bit of EQ treatment. And then the sub, I froze this one to audio so I could do this little fade here, but there's our bass line. So the last thing left to do is fill out with these synths here. And these are all different leads. They're harmonizing with each other. And that's really what's going to give the melodic notes for this drop. Because these pads they're sick and they really fill it up. But they're not really playing a melody. They're just kind of the same note the whole time, you know? So yeah, let's go through some of these. And the one important thing, I think, so this layer is probably the main one that you hear. Right? But then all these other layers are harmonies to that. And then this one down here is that same analog synth I was using in the intro, just kind of carrying into the drop too. Adds some nice low end, some nice low notes. And then this lead in honestly seals the deal for this like pre-drop. So let's play that in context. Just to show you, if I turn off this group, all these pads that I made, look at how empty it's going to be. And now with it on. It's doing a lot to fill up the stereo and also the higher frequencies. Yeah, and then other than that, it's just going to be little accent vocals during the drop. For the second part of the drop, I'm just going to have this atmospheric vocal thing playing. And then we kind of have a new progression for this little outro of the drop part, and then a new progression for drop 2, which you'll have to see in the next video. So let me spend a couple minutes next talking about the mix down. I think I really pushed this song to its max, and I wouldn't have done that if it wasn't for referencing. So for this song, I referenced the Where You Are Frost Top edit, which is insane, so you should definitely listen to that too. But he had such a wide, loud, full mix, so I dragged it in. You know, let's listen to my first. So all these audio files are just me recording it. You know, so this one was like the very beginning, this one was maybe like a few days later, and then this one's probably pretty close to the final. So this first one's probably gonna sound like shit. Let's see. Compare that to the final product. You can see how much more like narrow and just less full the first rendition sounded, and then as I was kind of recording these, you know, they just get better and better. So that one's already sounding fuller, but the snare, I hadn't added those snare layers yet. So that snare compared to now. I mean, it's a huge difference. And then this one's probably pretty close to the final one. So if you don't kind of know how to reference, I could explain that, because it's really, really useful when you're in the mix down stage. And I should also mention I mix as I go, but at the end, when I'm like probably 95% done, I do sit down and do like one dedicated mix down session. I don't always use a reference track, only if I could find one that's pretty similar to what I'm going for. So yeah, let's listen to this Where You Are one really quick. pretty huge, right? I tried to get as close as I could. But the first thing I do is just compare band to the reference track and to mine. So what I do is I take a screenshot. This first one is the frost top one of the mix that I'm referencing. And then I take a screenshot of mine. So this is obviously before I fixed everything. And then I just kind of note up a few things that I notice, the big differences, both visually and audibly. And then I just go in and make these corrections. Obviously not blindly, like I'm not just going to try to get it to look like this. I try to kind of find a happy middle ground of pushing it to look like what I'm trying to make it look like, and also using my ear to make sure it's actually sounding good, the changes I'm making. The visual tool is nice, but it does still come down to what sounds good and what doesn't. That's one thing I do, just comparing the overall span. And the other thing I do is I grab an EQ and I just kind of get it real thin like this. I don't know. So let's say we'll go from like 120. Yeah, we'll go from 120 to 500. So this is kind of like your low mids, and I'll just listen to those. And then I'll do the same thing. I'll just copy this EQ and I'll put it on mine, and then I'll listen to that. What I'll do is you could just kind of highlight these, and I'll just drag these up a little bit. And I'll kind of go band by band, and I'll use something like an ozone imager. I think this is free. And I'm just looking at how wide his is. Again, using both visual tools like this, but also my ears. And then I'll go look at how wide mine is for those bands too. Yeah, so I'll do that for a bit. And whenever I see something that I want to improve or fix, I don't do it on the master. I go find which sounds actually need that improvement. So if I'm looking at his mix and I'm like if I see that, from 1 to, 5K on his mix, it was super wide and mine doesn't sound that wide, I'll just go and find which sounds are occupying those frequencies. So for me, it'd probably be this pads group. And I'll just go and kind of layer by layer, I'll either make them wide by just panning them, or I'll just add a widener like here, for example, ozone imager. Yes, I'll do that until I'm kind of happy with it. And that's pretty much the process. So if I turn these bands off now, there's the master. Reverb is just for like a throw at the very end. Utility is just for the builds. This Pro Q, everything under 20, everything above 20,000, and then a little mid side at 225 on linear phase mode, very important. Then it goes into a G clip, and the rest of these are just visual tools. And the utility -6 is just for OBS. Like, it comes in way louder than my mic, so I kind of match it after. But yeah, that's the mixing and mastering process. It's really helpful, if you know of a song that's pretty similar to what you're making, definitely try to reference and try to do some of these things that I was talking about. And also just ask for feedback from your friends or from feedback streams. Like I sent this song to maybe like 4 or 5 people, and they all had really good feedback. 2 people mentioned that the snare needs to be bigger, and that was something I didn't pick up on, and something I'm really glad, I asked about, because I think the snare turned out really good in the end. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Like I said, we're gonna cover drop 2 in the next episode, but hope you learned something, and see you next time.